CEO. And hello, everyone. I hope that you are enjoying conference as I am. And welcome to this talk on how to define test strategy in Agile. I would like to start with light, less formal thing. I have full empathy for you since it's time after lunch. So, can we compare a Christmas time when a release time, when everyone is in a hurry, preparing gifts, tired, but still excited about big day? If your family is in any way like mine, you trudge through the endless list of the movies where Home Alone always finds its place. I have heard that this film can be a big metaphor for testing industry, and I can agree. The frazzled, disorganized McAllister family is like any enterprise organization, and the mischievous, adorable Kevin is completely ignored software tester. Are you sometimes feeling like Kevin, that you left alone, and at the same time you are actually the first one who realizes where the release is going? So, with this talk, actually, I would like to save your lives and how we can avoid that this picture becomes our reality. Let's start with a question. How often do you have releasable product increment? Please bear in mind that releasable doesn't mean released, because the decision to actually release the product is an economical one. Could you please raise your hand if you have releasable product increment after every sprint? Let's see how we can improve this situation. Have you noticed what was the stork is carrying in the bag? Actually, what kind of the messages the stork was carrying in the bag? Let's look together. If I can go back, but I couldn't. Okay. There was messages about high quality, completed, well-tested. So, do you have a well-tested product increment after every sprint? This question is actually a crucial one for your testing organization and your testing strategy. Jeff Sutherland, co-author of the Scrum, said, "It is not done if it's not tested." And I will mention some examples, like a part of the feature that is missing that is promised to the stakeholder is missing and needs to be fixed in the next sprint, or breaking bugs has been discovered by end user and needs to be fixed in the next sprint. And I wouldn't divide the term well-tested, releasable, done. And we are getting to the first point about good test strategy. Becoming potentially releasable is a good habit. If you have testing in a sprint and you are able actually to finish testing in a sprint, then you have controllable, repeatable testing process. It is not necessary that team is able to do that for every sprint. But if your team is unable to do that for 2 or 3 or more sprints in a row, then it's not just the question that maybe the team is delivering less value than it could, but it's very hard to gauge how much work is needed to bring product back to being releasable. The main aspects of the Scrum are inspect and adapt. But it seems that some teams are adapting into not doing Scrum. You are Agile or you aren't. What if you are not? What is the major consequence of not doing Scrum? Well, the major consequence is that you need to manage undone work. You need to ensure the quality of your release. You need to take care about functional and non-functional release testing. You couldn't expect that a just magical word Scrum will solve all your organizational challenges. And the second point about good test strategy is a risk-based approach. If you're trying to test everything, there is a huge possibility that you won't be able to finish testing in a Scrum. And bear in mind that your product owner is interested to seeing that just key functionalities are working and that your project budget is limited. So do prioritization, mark your key functionalities. In this slide, I have listed some techniques that can help you about risk-based approach. Of course, there are a lot of them, but just this one can be helpful. Equivalence classes or partitions is technique that is based on idea that different test conditions can be divided per group or per partitions, and that all test condition, one group or partition will be treated by the software on the same way. So it's just enough to test one test condition per group. Or pairwise testing that is based on phenomenon that errors in software are usually caused by one or two factors. The errors that are caused by many factors are exponentially smaller, so it's enough to test combination, but just with two factors. And test intensity table usage can help us to map desired level of test intensity to appropriate test design technique. But before you do any kind of prioritization, try to understand your domain. It is very simple, but very often skipped point in practice. It is highly recommendable that you organize workshops with your stakeholders, your end users, and try to understand their perspective. You need to solve your jigsaw puzzle. Do exploratory testing for every sprint to continuously learn about your system and its dependencies. The next point is comprehensive definition of done. And this is the most powerful risk detector for complex work. It will help you to reduce the risk of undone work by making transparent what is needed to create, for done increment, and in making actually transparent for all impediments that are getting in way of achieving this goal. The bigger the gap between what team defines as a done and actually what is needed to be created, the more disruption will be happening in the future due to undone work. Fourth point is your team spirit. Agile is more culture than process. You need to get your testing knowledge in your team. If you don't have it, you will fail. Usually, the teams and organizations are failing in achieving agile software development because for them it's impossible to get different discipline in a team. So you need to build your team culture that all of team members see the same figure, or all of them see the necessity to finish testing in a sprint. And then all of them will contribute to that goal. Last but not least is a quick insight into the quality of your application or test automation with CI/CD. I intentionally left it to the end Not that I think that is less important, but people usually think about test strategy as about test automation, and they tend to think that everything what we mentioned before will be organized or somehow done by someone, and that is the major pitfall. You firstly need to think about your testing methodology, solve organizational challenges, and then you are ready for the technical ones. When we start with test automation, we firstly need to understand our system architecture. Actually, test automation starts before the first line of the code is written. And quality couldn't be added on, it should be somehow built in. I will mention some examples from my experience when we built traffic management system that consists of several Windows services that are exchanging messages between each other. And at the beginning of the project, we built data player, data generator, different hooks on our message broker to enable testability and actually enable CI/CD. If you are talking about legacy system, you need to look under the hood. When an end user performs an action, you should follow different requests or messages and figure out what's happening there. Proper test automation is not just UI automation. And proper test strategy is leveraging tests on all layers, including API, component, integration, and unit tests. In Agile, test automation is not our choice, it's a must. And actually, if we would like to have quick insight into the quality of our application, we should implement continuous testing. If we would like to consider complete pipeline, we should think about all stages. Either we are doing continuous delivery when we should manually deploy to the production, or we are doing continuous deployment and everything's automated. Our quick insight to the quality of our application should be that we look at the status in our build server. And if we see the trend result, if we see test result trend like this, we are safe. If there is a new bug, we can easily catch it. But if you look and our test result trend is like this, we are in trouble. We need to invest significant amount of time to figuring out what's happening here. And actually, we are losing fast feedback, and our test automation is dying. So the first quality gate is green build policy. I would highly recommend that you start with a small amount of test scripts and test them against CI. When they pass, increase the number of scripts. If there is any failure, your team should react with a huge priority and fix that issue and continue with that good practice. Usually, we have that test result trend because of the flaky test. And flaky tests are our enemy. True, they are like bacteria, spread very fast. If we don't react immediately, find the reason, and eliminate it, our test automation will die. One of the reasons for flaky tests can be improper test management data. If you are sharing data between the tests, sooner or later, our test will work under unexpected set of data and they will fail. I would suggest that at the beginning of the project, you invest amount of your time and build an approach that will support data independence. You can consider, for example, using framework like DB-Unit or NDB-Unit, depending on technology that you are working in, or in-memory databases. There are different possibilities, but you need to invest some time about that. Apart from data collision issue, environmental issue can be a problem for flaky tests as well. Instead of setting up environment manually, that is very error-prone and time-consuming task, you should consider infrastructure as approach, infrastructure as a code approach, and actually where your DevOps department will provision environment for you, your every test execution will be in an initial but desired state. Sometimes you need to make compromise and accept the thing that is temporary, easy, and more efficient to test some feature manually, regardless of test automation trends. And actually, that is okay unless you are testing Amazon.com or your team is releasing every few seconds. The major takeaway from this presentation should be that if you are doing Scrum, that you try to do in-sprint testing. And there are some recommendations that can help you to achieve this goal. Apply risk-based approach. Create comprehensive definition of done. Get testing knowledge in your team. Ensure fast feedback from test automation. But if you are for any reason unable to do that, doesn't mean that you are unhappy. It just means that your business needs are not aligned with the Scrum, and you need to reconsider which project methodology is best for you. For those of you who are doing Scrum, I hope that this presentation can help you to eventually improve your testing strategy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Branka. Let me read out the first question in Slido. How should we make developers and POs understand that the testing should be done during the sprints?
It is easy said than done that you actually change the culture, but we already heard about that you should do that as an every day and like day-to-day job, talking with people, that you are not in a hurry and that you just concentrate on your work. You should share idea, you should talk about consequences, and that is, I would say, a long-term goal. But without that, it's almost impossible.
Okay. If we postpone scheduled release because PO has some other priority, are we going out of Scrum?
Actually, I already said that release is an economical decision. It's more about what you are producing as an increment of that Scrum. If it's implemented, tested, it's done, then you finish your work. About the decision to actually release that product, it's more like business decision.
Okay, thank you. How can you overcome overcomplicated branch release structure in an environment or organization that doesn't really welcome change?
I would say that this question is about the culture.
Yeah.
You need to figure out that in an organization what is the key and actually unlock that challenge.
Yeah, okay, thank you. What is your suggestion to test what is being currently developed in the same sprint? How to start development and testing parallelly?
Actually, that kind of recommendation are what you are need to do. Most powerful of them are risk-based approach and comprehensive definition of done. That you are not over-testing and that you are not actually using a lot of time to be sure that everything is working, but at the same time that you are very transparent with your team what everything needs to be done that we as a team have increment.